The sting on my cheek wasn't nearly as cold as the words that followed, echoing through the crowded university plaza, while hundreds of people in caps and gowns turned to stare at the scene unfolding in front of the fountain. My father's hand was still raised, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated rage, while my mother stood beside him, her finger pointed at my chest as she screamed at the top of her lungs that I was a thief, a liar, and that I didn't deserve the degree I was holding in my shaking hands. This was supposed to be the proudest day of my life, the culmination of 4 years of blood, sweat, and literal tears, but instead I was standing there in my summa cum laude cords, feeling the heat of a public humiliation I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I looked at the degree in my hand, the piece of paper I had worked 3 jobs to afford because they refused to contribute a single cent. And then I looked at the 2 people who were supposed to love me most, realizing in that singular, vibrating moment that I was done being their punching bag. Was I wrong for what I did next? Or would you have finally snapped too if the people who raised you tried to destroy your biggest achievement in front of the entire world? Tell me if you would have done the same thing, because as I stand here today, years later, I still wonder if there was any other way to handle the absolute carnage that followed that afternoon. To understand how we got to that slap on the plaza, you have to understand the dynamic of the Miller household, where I was always the extra child, the one who was expected to provide support, but never receive it. My younger brother, Leo, was the sun around which my parents revolved, the golden boy who could do no wrong even when he was failing out of private schools and blowing through the college fund my parents had supposedly set aside for both of us. By the time it was my turn to go to university, the well was dry, or so they told me, claiming that unforeseen circumstances had eaten up my share of the savings, though I knew for a fact those circumstances were actually Leo's brand, new car, and his 3rd attempt at a freshman year at a posh out-of-state school. I remember sitting at the kitchen table when I was 18, showing my acceptance letter to my dream school, and my mother didn't even look up from her coffee, simply saying, "That's nice, but we can't help you, so don't expect a free ride like you're some kind of royalty." I didn't ask for a free ride. I just wanted the same chance Leo had, but I quickly realized that if I wanted a future, I was going to have to build it with my own bare hands. I spent the next 4 years living in a state of perpetual exhaustion, working graveyard shifts at a 24-hour diner, tutoring underclassmen between my own lectures, and taking on freelance coding projects until my eyes bled, just to keep up with tuition and rent. My parents never called to ask how I was doing, never checked if I had enough to eat, and only reached out when they needed me to bail Leo out of some self-inflicted crisis, or when they wanted me to come home and do the heavy lifting around the house because my father's back was acting up again. Every time I tried to share a win, like making the dean's list or landing a competitive internship, they would immediately pivot the conversation back to Leo's potential, or how I was becoming arrogant because of my education. It reached a boiling point during my senior year when I landed a high-paying job offer that would start the Monday after graduation, a position at a top-tier tech firm that meant I would finally, for the first time in my life, have financial security. I made the mistake of telling them during a rare Sunday dinner, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they would be proud of me for making it on my own. Instead, my father slammed his fork down and accused me of being selfish, for not offering to use my signing bonus to pay off Leo's mounting credit card debts. "You think you're better than us because of some fancy title," he had sneered, while my mother nodded in agreement, claiming that I owed my success to the discipline they gave me by making me work for everything myself. I stayed quiet then, biting my tongue until it bled, telling myself I just had to make it to graduation. When the big day finally arrived, I didn't even think they would show up, but they surprised me by arriving at the ceremony, though they looked like they were attending a funeral rather than a celebration. I walked across that stage, heard my name called with honors, and felt a surge of triumph that I thought was untouchable. But the moment I met them afterward for photos, the mask slipped. They didn't offer a hug or a well done. Instead, they started berating me because I hadn't mentioned them in the brief "thank you" post I'd made on social media earlier that morning. They felt disrespected, that I hadn't publicly credited them for my success, and when I finally stood up for myself and pointed out that they hadn't contributed a single dollar or a single word of encouragement to my degree, that's when it happened. My father's hand connected with my face so hard my cap flew off, and they started screaming that I was an ungrateful brat who didn't deserve the paper I was holding. They made such a scene that campus security started moving toward us, and in that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It solidified into ice. So that's the situation I was in, standing in the middle of my own graduation, humiliated and assaulted by the people who were supposed to be my biggest supporters. I had a choice to make. I could walk away and keep taking their abuse, or I could use the power I had finally built for myself to change everything. Before I tell you what happened next, and the secret I had been keeping about their own financial situation, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have forgiven them for the sake of family, or would you have walked away right then and there? I need to know if I'm the only one who thinks that blood shouldn't be a shield for toxicity. Now, as I stood there with my face stinging and the crowd watching, I didn't yell back. I didn't cry. I simply reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and did something I had been preparing to do for months, though I hadn't intended for it to be this dramatic. You see, what my parents didn't know was that for the last 2 years, I hadn't just been paying my own way. I had been the silent benefactor keeping their lives from collapsing. My father had lost his pension in a bad investment years ago, something he was too proud to tell anyone, and my mother's spending habits had driven them into a hole so deep they were months away from losing the house. Because I had been working so much and had landed that high-paying internship, I had been secretly funneling money into an account that paid their mortgage and their utility bills through a third-party management service I'd set up so they wouldn't know it was me. I had done it out of a misplaced sense of duty, thinking that if I took care of them, they might eventually see my value. But as I looked at my father's snarling face, I realized they would never see me as anything more than a resource to be exploited. With a few taps on my phone, I logged into the management portal and hit cancel on all recurring payments. I then looked my father dead in the eye and said, "You're right. I don't deserve this degree. I deserve way better than the parents who gave me nothing but grief while I kept the roof over their heads." The confusion on their faces was almost comical at first. "What are you talking about, you delusional girl?" my mother hissed. I told them right there, in front of the security guards and the lingering students, exactly how much I had paid to keep their house from foreclosure over the last 24 months. I told them that the anonymous grant they thought they had received from the bank was actually my sweat and my overtime. I told them that as of 30 seconds ago, they were officially on their own. I watched the blood drain from my father's face as the reality started to sink in. He tried to reach for my arm, his tone suddenly shifting from rage to a desperate, wheedling sort of "let's talk about this rationally." But I stepped back. I told them that I was changing my phone number. I was moving to the city for my new job, and that if they ever contacted me again, I would file a restraining order for the assault they had just committed in front of 50 witnesses. I walked away from them, leaving my graduation cap on the grass where it had fallen, and I didn't look back once. The aftermath was a whirlwind of chaos. Over the next few weeks, they tried everything to get back into my good graces. They sent Leo to my new apartment to beg for money, claiming that they were going to be homeless within 60 days if I didn't do my duty. Leo, of course, tried to make it about him, saying that if the house went under, he wouldn't have a place to stay while he figured out his next business venture. I told Leo that he was 20, 2 years old, and perfectly capable of getting a job at the same diner I had worked at for 4 years. I blocked his number too. My parents then tried the legal route, claiming that I had stolen money from them or that the payments I had made constituted a verbal contract to continue supporting them, but my lawyer, a friend I'd made during my internship, laughed them out of the room. Without my financial cushion, the house was gone within 3 months. They had to downsize to a tiny, cramped apartment on the outskirts of town, and my father had to take a job as a night security guard just to keep the lights on. The golden boy, Leo, was forced to actually work for the first time in his life, and from what I hear, he hates every second of it. People in my extended family tried to guilt-trip me, calling me heartless for letting my parents struggle after everything they did for me. But my response was always the same. They did nothing for me but teach me how to survive without them. I realized that for years I had been trying to buy their love, thinking that if I was successful enough or generous enough, they would finally treat me with the respect I saw them shower on my brother. But the slap at graduation was the ultimate clarity. It showed me that some people don't want a daughter. They want a servant who doesn't talk back. Cutting them off was the hardest and most liberating thing I have ever done. I spent my first big paycheck not on a car or a fancy watch, but on a therapist who helped me understand that my worth isn't tied to my ability to solve my parents' problems. Today, I am thriving in my career. I have a chosen family that actually celebrates my wins, and I haven't spoken to my biological parents in 3 years. I sometimes feel a twinge of sadness when I see other people with their supportive families, but then I remember the sting of that slap and the look of pure hate in my father's eyes, and I know I made the right choice. My degree is hanging on my office wall now, a reminder that I am capable of achieving anything, even when the people who brought me into this world are trying to pull me down. The moral of the story is that you don't owe your future to people who tried to destroy your past, even if those people are family. If you've ever had to make the difficult choice to walk away from toxic people to save yourself, just know that you aren't alone and you aren't the villain for choosing your own peace. Like this video if you were on my side and think I did the right thing by cutting them off. Subscribe for more stories like this where we stand up to the people who try to break us, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far by letting them lose the house, or did they get exactly what they deserved? I'll be reading through your responses, and I'll see you all in the next story.